Welcome to the Bible's Greatest Mysteries. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and we're delighted to have you joining us once again. We love producing these programs for you so much that we would like for you to download the app.
gilberthouse.org/app. We've got two different versions, one for your mobile device, whether it's iOS, Android, or Amazon Kindle Fire phone or tablet. We've got links to those app stores at gilberthouse.org/app. But there are also versions for your smart TV or your set-top box, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, Google TV, Android TV. Go to their app store, look for Gilbert House, and download that, add it to your smart TV, and then we'll be there whenever you click your remote.
Oh yeah, it says GHTV, like this says
Look for that logo.
GHTV.
Look for that logo. And
By the way, you can get these from Light Hive Creations.
we've got a link at our store, gilberthouse.org/store, if you're interested. And the mugs, caps, shirts, goes to support the work of a friend of ours, Kenny C.
Yeah.
He and his fiancee, Gidget Manning, are behind Light Hive Creations, and what they earn from, and they produce these also for friends at Skywatch TV,
I
for
know.
Vicki Joy Anderson, for
Lots
Doug
of
Van Dorn,
ministries.
other ministries. They use the proceeds to support what Kenny does. He's a world-class musician, but he teaches music to elementary and high school age students. He's also got students via the internet, including our friend Pastor Doug Van Dorn and his daughter. But some of those students are from families whose parents can't afford to purchase the instruments that they're learning to play. And that's what Kenny does with the proceeds. He buys their instruments.
He provides the instruments. Some of those students can't even pay. Anytime a family gets into a hardship, Kenny will still try to find a way to teach that child. When you study music as a child, you create pathways in your brain that not only help you with music, but also help you with mathematics, with science, so many things that are important to later on. And let's face it, it gives confidence to a child that perhaps doesn't have a whole lot. And many of us who were musical as kids were maybe a bit of an introvert.
Yeah. But the good, and the other aspect of this that's really wonderful is that Kenny is a Bible-believing Christian. In fact, we'll be speaking at a conference with Kenny in July.
I know.
And we'll tell you about that after the break. But anyway, gilberthouse.org/store. You click on the link for the merch, and that's what that goes for. We actually donate all of that back to Kenny so that he can we can support the work that he does. Again, both of us love music. Sharon was a professional musician for decades, and so she really appreciates it. Me, I'm more of a hobbyist, but music is a wonderful gift from the Lord that allows us to praise Him, and we know, according to Hebrews chapter 2, that there is a time coming when we will be singing His praises. The book of Revelation will be singing, and
the Lord Himself
sing
as well.
will sing, yes. Hebrews chapter 2. So, yeah, it is something we want to propagate and do so through a Christian music teacher.
So Dr. Collins.
Dr. Stephen Collins. This was something that we were first alerted to when we first came to Skywatch TV back in 2015. He's the author of the book called Discovering the City of Sodom. He'd been working at that site for about 10 years at that point in time. He has convinced us, the evidence that he has found, his director of scientific analysis, Dr. Philip Sylvia, both of whom we've met at archaeology conferences that they have put on at Trinity Southwest University in Albuquerque. In September of 2022, we were there for their conference, and we did a couple of episodes of our program, Sci Friday, which in fact you can find on our app. You go back through the archives. You can also look for and search through the app by speaker or by guest on our program. So if you look for Dr. Stephen Collins, you'll find a number of interviews with Dr. Collins. But we wanted to bring it to you on this program because it just within the last few weeks, it was announced that the paper that had been published the previous fall, in the fall, I believe it was November of 2021, Dr. Sylvia was one of the co-authors with a number of colleagues from the Comet Research Group. This is a group of people who are saying, hey, look, the Earth is vulnerable to impacts from things like the Tunguska meteorite that exploded about 100 years ago over Siberia and leveled tens of thousands of acres of forest. Well, they argued, and based on the evidence that was discovered at a site in Jordan called el-Hammam, that what happened there, and this was the fulfillment of God's warning to Abraham and the angels, then he warned Lot, get out of this city, we're about to level it, that whatever happened there was larger than what happened at Tunguska. The paper, which was published in an academic journal, peer-reviewed, called Scientific Reports, it's published by Nature, they withdrew the paper last month.
Well, I don't know about the volume that they published in, but Nature itself is a little left-leaning.
It is, and that was why it was so surprising that Scientific Reports, which is an imprint of Nature, accepted the paper, had it peer-reviewed, and published it. But they were subjected to serial complainers who kept flooding the editor with complaints, not about the research from Tal el-Hammam, but about how they interpreted the evidence from Tunguska. And so Scientific Reports withdrew the paper, which now the critics can say, see, that paper that they published claiming that this site was the location of Sodom, it's been withdrawn, it's been debunked.
That
is not
really flimsy.
It is flimsy, and that's not what happened. The editor caved into pressure. In fact, did not publish the responses to the critics written by Dr. Sylvia and his colleagues at the Comet Research Group.
That's really unfair.
So yes, we're convinced by the evidence. I think you will be as well when you start digging into it. But again, we wanted to bring you this because it's very timely. Our interview from the Archaeology Conference at Trinity Southwest University from the fall of 2022, Dr. Stephen Collins.
We're here in the hospitality suite at the International Symposium for Archaeology and the Bible. Dr. Collins, we really appreciate you putting this together. First, why did you bring back this conference? This is the second year that it's been back after a hiatus of some years.
Yeah, almost 15 years. It was a long time. Well, we used to do it in the wintertime because January was the deadest month of the year after the holidays, and so we used to have it then, back from 2001 to 2005, I believe. And it just so happens that in 2005 we also started the Tal el-Hammam excavation, and which had to be in that winter framework, because the valley, the Jordan Valley, where the excavation is located, is way too hot. Any other time of the year,
we've been there in May. We can attest to that.
So it's pretty warm. So we just had to sacrifice the symposium, and we didn't realize it was going to disappear for that many years, but we were just so busy, and so we've done 15 seasons at the Tal el-Hammam site since then, since we laid it down. But then, by 15 seasons, you kind of figure things out. It's not as intense and overwhelming as it used to be. Since all of our equipment and all my clothes and all of everything we need for the dig is in Jordan already, it stays there. So life got a little bit easier, and we decided. And we originally did the symposium because we wanted our students to interact with the best scholars in the world of archaeology and biblical archaeology. So, but we thought, we got to bring all these people in. Why don't we open it to the public and charge some money so we can help defray the expenses of the symposium? So we did that, and now we're back. So we decided last year we're going to do it. In fact, it was Gary Byers, my assistant director at Tal el-Hammam dig, who said, we really ought to bring that back for our students. We really need to do that again. So we decided to do it. We had a really good symposium last fall in last September. And then we asked everybody to raise their hand last year.
Yeah.
If we do it next year, will you come back? Of course, just about everybody raised their hand. Well, everybody was expecting it to be in September. But after COVID, all the hotels got greedy, I think, and they decided to raise their prices way up to sort of make up for lost time. And boy, September was the high season here in Albuquerque, and but August still was kind of lagging at the end of the low season because kids are going back to school, people aren't traveling as much. So we decided, we just can't do it in September. It's just too expensive, and we can't. You can only charge so much for a symposium or a conference. So we decided we'll do it in August, and I think we lost quite a few people, but we still have a good group this year, but not as many as last year.
Yeah, we're among those who raised our hands, and we're happy to be back again.
Well, we're glad you're back because some people raised their hands and
couldn't make it.
They wind up not being able to make it.
Yeah. We'll talk a little bit about some of the subjects covered here, but I want to just touch for a bit on the work that you've been doing at Tal el-Hammam. We were made aware of it a few years back when it first attracted some news after Dr. Philip Sylvia, your director of scientific analysis there, presented at a conference in the fall of 2018, I believe. Perfect timing for us because then in the spring of 2019, from Mount Nebo, we were able to point to that little hill extending into the Jordan Valley and say, look, there it is. What was it that made you look at that site, overlooking the Jordan River, the plains of Moab, as a potential dig site?
Well, the site of Sodom and the cities of the plain, of course, had long been controversial. Babadra and Numera and some other sites near the south end of the Dead Sea had always been more or less lumped together as the traditional cities of the plain. There were some severe problems with that I was particularly unaware of. And other scholars had to do a lot of bending and massaging of the historical record to make that happen. But I was even on a TV documentary back in the early 1990s talking about Babadra and the location at the south end of the Dead Sea as Sodom and all of that. So I was just going along with the conventional wisdom at the time. And then about 1996, I was leading a tour, and we were going to include Jordan. And so we had gone all the way through Israel. We're way down at Eilat, and we're going to cross over to Aqaba, and we're going to come back up and go to eventually go to Petra, and then go over to Babadra, Sodom. So I had that on my itinerary. So at the hotel over in Israel before we crossed over, I got the Bible out just to kind of read and brush up on it. And as I read through it, I got to the end of it, and I thought, wait a minute. I didn't see anything in there that would locate Sodom toward the south end of the Dead Sea. And so I read it again. 2 or 3 more times that night, so at least 4 times. And when I got through, I said, not only is there nothing in the entire stretch of the Sodom narratives that would locate Sodom toward the south end of the Dead Sea, every indicator I see in there would locate it north and east of the Dead Sea. And because the Bible was very clear that Lot looked down and saw the cities of the plain, saw the Kikar, the circle of the Jordan, and the cities of the Kikar, and that he traveled there from well north of Jerusalem above Jericho in the highlands at Bethel and Ai, where Lot and Abraham were stationed at the time. It says he lifted up his eyes from that location and then traveled eastward and pitched his tent as far as Sodom. Well, everything about that, and the Bible clearly said that the Jordan, and these were the cities of the Kikar, of the Jordan, and the Bible is very clear that the Jordan River, the descending, which Jordan means descending of the fresh water, ends at the Bay of the Dead Sea, at the mouth of the Jordan below Pisgah, which is Nebo. Well, that's all north of the Dead Sea. So it's pretty clear if you know all the geography. And so I thought, that bugs me. I've been taking people to the wrong site, and so is everybody else. So what are we going to do about this? Well, nothing actually, because that very year we started our excavation with Gary and I and Bryant Wood and others up at Kirbet el-Makadar, which was also about 12 miles north of Jerusalem, up in the highlands, not far from Bethel and Ai. So I just kind of logged it in the back of my head. It bothered me that so many people had flipped the geography upside down. But I didn't have time to do anything about it because we were just starting an excavation. I didn't need a project, didn't need a study to do. So I laid it down. Well, about 6 years later, about 2000, got a little dicey in the West Bank, as you recall.
Mm-hmm.
And, we had going back and forth to the dig, we had a few rocks thrown at the bus and things like that. And so we decided to shut the dig down, at least temporarily. And so after that, in the winter of 2000, 2001, now, as an archaeologist, I'm thinking, oh, we don't have a project to go to. We just shut the dig down. What are we going to do? So I thought, that Sodom conundrum, I've got to dive into that.
I wouldn't have thought that the political situation in Israel would have an impact on the discovery. Isn't this ironic, though? Because the political struggles in Israel are spiritual.
Oh, absolutely.
And because of it, Dr. Collins was compelled to look for another dig site for security reasons, and that's what led him to this location, a city destroyed at the time of Abraham and Lot that was big enough. I mean, it was the largest city in the area at that point in history, much like 8 times bigger than Jerusalem.
Yes, and had a water source.
Year-round water source, right. It was the only site that, in fact, he'll talk about this in next week's program, but continuously occupied from about 4000 BC, and we recognize that from a biblical perspective, those numbers don't align if you just add up the ages of the patriarchs. We're using the dating of the archaeologists, but from 4000 BC down to the time of its destruction in the Middle Bronze Age. So more than 2,000 years continuously occupied, even when during the Middle Bronze Age, there was a period of about 400 years when every other city in the area had been abandoned.
Well, it excites me because for my research, when I write the Red Wing Saga, I try to understand, one of my characters, and a couple of them are archaeologists. Back then they were called antiquarians. And many of them were clergymen. And they went to what was called the Levant at the time and would travel around with guides. And many of those guides in the area of Tal el-Hammam told them that is the site of ancient Sodom. And they found 4 other tells in the area, 4 other big mounds that they were able to identify all 5 of those cities.
Yeah, Gomorrah and the other cities of the plain, right. And Dr. Sylvia has told me, and we've discussed this on an interview for my podcast, that they identify those same tulls as the cities of the plain. So yes, Sodom has been found. It's a fascinating confirmation of one of the most spectacular events in biblical history. And our conversation with Dr. Collins continues straight ahead on the Bible's greatest mysteries.
In the days of old, giants walked the earth. Scripture tells how David defeated Goliath, how angels served the Creator, and how the serpent deceived God's image bearers. The prophecies foretold of a coming Savior, one that would reach across the veil and set the captives free. Featuring Derek Gilbert,
UFO True Believers, the Ancient Aliens Prophets,
Carl Gallups,
the cherubim, the living creatures,
and Micah Van Huss.
The story of the giant of Kandahar.
At the Mysteries of the Bible Verse event in Carmel, Indiana, June 13th and 14th.
Welcome back to the Bible's Greatest Mysteries. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I am Sharon Gilbert. Boy, I just have to have a drink of my green tea from my GHTV mug.
Ah, yes. Once again, gilberthouse.org/store. You also find links there for our books and our videos. We've got streaming video on demand. In fact, if you want to see our tours of Israel, including our 2019 tour, where from Mount Nebo. We actually point out where you can see the site of Tal el-Hammam, which is the topic of our discussion here, the site of ancient Sodom.
Mount Nebo's amazing because on a clear day, you can even see Jerusalem from there. You can definitely see Jericho and many other cities, but yeah, you can see Tal el-Hammam.
Right. It's plainly visible from that location, and really very interesting both historically and prophetically, because the war of Gog and Magog, Ezekiel 38 and 39, designates that area, the Valley of the Travelers east of the sea. Travelers being a word that the Canaanites used for the spirits of the Rephaim, also used of Mount Nebo. When God told Moses, climb this mountain to get your only look at this, he called it Mountain of Avarim, this mountain of the travelers, this mountain of the spirits of the Rephaim. There was something supernatural about that site.
Do you remember when the late Mike Heiser came to us one day and said, oh, by the way, there's an entry in the Dictionary of Demons and Deities of the Bible for Avarim?
Yeah.
Look it up.
For travelers, exactly. That was a jaw-dropping moment because otherwise you just think, okay, this Valley of the Travelers, east of the Dead Sea, that must refer to the King's Highway, which is the main route by which people would travel in the ancient world from Egypt to Damascus and then on to Mesopotamia. This is not talking about people on the King's Highway. Travelers refers to the spirits of the Rephaim. They're referred to by that title in Ugaritic text. That's a Canaanite city-state from ancient Syria, dated to about the time of the Judges. So, yeah, there's something supernatural about it. And when you get into it and think, okay, so the travelers will be blocked, according to Ezekiel 39, verse 11. Does that mean the spirits of the Rephaim, in other words, demons, will be part of the army of Gog, of Magog in that final battle?
Well, I think that is a very good question
Yeah.
to ask. Yeah, it's a fascinating topic, and I'm so glad that Mike put us onto that research, because honestly, it's been part of everything we've done since.
Absolutely, yeah. This is not fringe. It is actually part of the biblical theology, both for Christians and for Jews. And so this is why we get so excited about returning to Israel and seeing these sites with our own eyes. We'll tell you how you can do that with us in October in just a bit. But now we want to return to our conversation with the man who found Sodom, the author of the book, Discovering the City of Sodom, Dr. Stephen Collins.
So I purposefully, a lot of times when I do these kinds of research, I don't really want to see what other people think. Don't care. Because it seemed like in this case, especially, everybody else was wrong. And so I really don't want to listen anymore to what anybody else had to say. I'm going to go back to the Hebrew text, and I'm going to work it word for word, phrase for phrase, sentence for sentence, and let's see what it really says, and let's see what it doesn't say. And so I did that. And in fact, what I did was I put in, because I knew if I didn't put in to read a paper, at least at NEAS, Near East Archaeological Society meeting in the fall, I probably would find reasons to put it off. But I put in for that paper, so I was on the docket to present some kind of
stress is a powerful motivator.
Some kind of a paper. So I dove into that research, and it got longer and longer and longer and longer. It actually went beyond a paper and became a small book, and we called it The Search for Sodom and Gomorrah. But it was just basically my exegesis of the biblical text and what the text said, and it was very clear that Sodom was north and east of the Dead Sea. In fact, it was very clear that it was the largest, the Bible presents it as the largest Bronze Age city north and east of the Dead Sea in an area visible from Bethel and Ai.
Something worth kings coming all the way from Mesopotamia and crossing the desert, crossing through Tadmor, Damascus, coming down from the north and doing battle with these kings.
No, exactly right. And not only that, if you go back to Genesis 10, the cities of the plain are mentioned parallel, right alongside with the great cities of Mesopotamia. And so when it's talking about the extent of the Canaanites, that the Canaanites lived along the coast, and it brings us down from Sidon to Gerar, to Gaza, to Gerar, and then it jumps over to the valley. It says then from Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim to Elisha, which is Laish in the north. So it's going south to north. In fact, it was brought up in the conference just a little while ago that the Transjordan cities, from an Egyptian point of view, on the Egyptian map lists are always listed from south to north as you come from Egypt. And that's exactly the way they're listed in the book of Genesis. So we decided Sodom was the southernmost city because it's Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, so on. But it's always mentioned first in the list. Whether it's just mention Sodom, Gomorrah, or Sodom, Gomorrah, and the other cities, it's always listed first. It's the only one ever mentioned by itself.
Giving it some, indicating that it was really important.
Right. And the king of Sodom is the only one that plays in the story. He's the only one that has a voice.
Mm-hmm.
So it seemed that was a reasonable assessment that Sodom was big. It was the biggest one of those cities anyway. So if you could find the biggest Bronze Age city north and east of the Dead Sea in the immediate vicinity of the southern Jordan Valley, you probably have Sodom.
Just to give viewers a sense of how important it is, because in the biblical narrative, we would assume Jericho plays a much bigger role because that's where Joshua focuses his efforts when they first cross the river. But in the time of Abraham, how big was Sodom, Tal el-Hammam, compared to Jericho and, say, Jerusalem?
Well, you could probably put 7 or 8 Jerusalems, maybe 10 of them, inside the fortifications at Tal el-Hammam.
That much bigger.
And we used to think that you could fit that many Jerichos in there too. We now know that Jericho has a lower city. So it may be much bigger than everybody used to think it was in the Middle Bronze Age in the time of Abraham. But it's still, Tal el-Hammam is much larger than Jericho.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the biggest city. In fact, we now know it as the largest continuously occupied, not largest city, but largest continuously occupied Bronze Age city in the entire southern Levant. Now there's only one, in southern Levant, there's only really one city, maybe 2, that got bigger. Ashkelon on the coast and Hatzor in the upper Galilee. So, but we always say, we have more satellites. They crammed all their people into 2 big towns, into the big towns, but we have dozens of satellites around us. We have guardian cities around us, plus the other cities of the plain, all in a very tight, within a 6-7 kilometer radius of a center. So it's pretty packed in with sites.
Previously, we've had the opportunity to interview Dr. Sylvia, who's so he's kind of laid out the scientific evidence. I'm kind of curious, though, as the director of archaeology there at Tal el-Hammam, what was your feeling when you began to get a sense of the size of the city on that hill?
Well, that sense of the size of it was evident because we've been working in Israel for a while. I've been to every major every major ancient city in Israel and Jordan. So I have a sense of the size of these things. And so when we first drove up to Tal el-Hammam, I couldn't believe how big it was. And I understood why a lot of people missed it, because it doesn't look like your average tell. It looks like just part of the landscape, and you don't realize that this hill is so big, but it's artificially built up over time.
Looks too big to be an artificial man-made construction.
Yeah, and so, in fact, when I first saw it, I didn't even realize at that point I was only looking at the upper city.
What's really interesting is that little school there in Albuquerque, Trinity Southwest University, which is now aligned with Veritas International University, offering a biblical archaeology program. So if you want to learn, if you've got a son or daughter who's interested in archaeology, interested in science, and considering a career in biblical, we need more biblical archaeologists.
We really do.
It's not a career where you're going to wind up financially secure, but boy, the legacy that you may leave by digging these things out of the earth.
The rocks are crying out.
Yes.
And the secular archaeologists do not want us to hear that message.
That is true. We have heard from archaeologist friends that even some of the Israeli archaeologists who are very secular in their worldview do not want that story out there, that it confirms the Bible. But you can't, I mean, facts are stubborn things. They don't care whether you believe them or not. Facts are facts. And the more they dig out of the earth, the more the biblical narrative is confirmed. Joshua's altar has been found. Sodom has been found. Cities that were erected by David, the kingdom of David, is now being unearthed at various sites around what used to be the territory of Judah.
And you and I believe that Bethany beyond the Jordan
Yes, where
has
John was
been
baptizing.
identified.
Yes, Bethany across the Jordan, beyond the Jordan, John chapter 1, where John baptized Jesus, where he called his first disciples. It's north of the Jordan, it's north of the Sea of Galilee, rather. Bethany is actually Bashan, the Greek Bethania, transliterated from the Latin Botania, which was their name for Bashan, enemy territory. That's where Jesus was baptized.
Bashan means place of the serpent.
And it is covered with megalithic structures devoted to the cult of the dead. We will take you there in October 19th through 30th of 2025. We'll take you to Gilgal Rephaim, larger than Stonehenge by far, 60,000 tons of stone. Stonehenge estimated at about 2,500 tons of stone.
It's a baby.
It is, and is much, much older. We'll also take you to the site where we believe Jesus was baptized, a site very similar to Gilgal Rephaim.
Right, and Derek and I may have been, along with Doug Van Dorn and Aaron Lipkin, the only ones who ever wanted to look at it, much less take video there.
Except for the archaeologist who's done the most recent digs there.
Well, yeah, he's what told us about. But as far as tourists,
that's right. It's
and
not on the tours.
Archaeologists, but you can go.
Yep. Find out more at our website, gilberthouse.org/travel. Now, we will go to the sites you want to see. We'll go into the Jordan River. We will get onto the Jesus boat on the Sea of Galilee. We'll worship on the place where Jesus walked across the water.
We will go to the actual burial site, and you can get at least 100 people in there.
Yep, the actual crucifixion site as well, based on the research of our good friend Rabbi Zev Porat, the Messianic rabbi based in Tel Aviv. Find out more again at our website, gilberthouse.org/travel. Our special guest this tour, Carl TEICHRIB, author of the book Game of Gods. He's a researcher, a lecturer, a polymath who's just
He's crazy.
So it'll be a wonderful experience. And again, ground zero in this long supernatural war.
And do not forget, we're going to Shiloh.
Oh, yes.
Where we will get to see the red heifers.
Yes, that's been in the news for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
So, your opportunity to see the red heifers with your own eyes, gilberthouse.org/travel. Well, speaking of monuments to the dead, next week we talk about the connection between those monuments and the ancient city of Sodom.
Oh.
Yeah, our conversation with Dr. Stephen Collins continues next week on the Bible's Greatest Mysteries.